Okay, so Grandpa, like I said, I already made a lot of recordings of conversations we had, probably hundreds of hours. So people, if I were to show those, they would already get a general concept of a lot of the philosophies. But just want to ask some quick questions with some stuff. So you would talk about how the ego is magnificent in its accomplishments. What does that mean?
Well, it's an absolutely necessary protective enclosure within which we're allowed to grow up and mature and wake up and grow up and become strong enough eventually to spend increasingly more time outside the boundaries, the, outside the ego boundaries. So, in that sense of the word, it's magnificent in its accomplishments, but it's limited in its usefulness.
What do you mean it's limited in its usefulness?
Well, at some point, in order to continue to evolve as an individually or personally, you need to go beyond the ego because there's so much more available in life, much more than the ego is able to help us with. So,
So I talked about the immortality project. So an immortality project would be, let's try to create, uh, you know, some computers in which we can put our minds,
yeah,
and this will let us live forever and stuff. But this is, someone would argue this is very ego based. This is an immortality project. This is a plan of salvation, a plan to save the self. And maybe Hare Krishna would say, no, no, no. What you need to do is just worship Krishna, and all that is, all that time you're spending doing those, you know, superfluous things that mean nothing, we could be spending giving to the poor, and doing things that Krishna likes. Any thoughts, Grandpa?
yeah. Well, see, is that ego based, or is that motivated by being living outside the ego? See, Jesus knew when he was outside of his ego that he could spend his entire life providing uh, handouts to the poor, but he 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 knew that he had more to offer than that. Was one of the temptations in the wilderness to turn stone into bread.
Could we talk about those three temptations, Grandpa, and what that means? What those three temptations were that Jesus said?
Yeah, well, the one temptation he knew he had the capability or the the capacity to feed the poor, and so that temptation was to turn stone into bread. The second one was to jump off the temple and survive the fall, and he knew he'd be able to do that, but that's a temptation to perform miracles, and he chose that that's not what he was here for, to perform miracles and to impress people and to help people with miraculous exploits. So he resisted that temptation. And the third one was to provide this life insurance, that is to bow down and worship, use all the techniques and procedures developed by human consciousness, ego consciousness. He knew he would be tempted, or no, he knew he could succeed at that too. So that one is to provide what I call this life insurance. The the, the first one is what I call this life in assistance. That's turning stone into bread. And the second one is afterlife assurance. So the turning stone into bread is this life assistance. Bowing down and worship is this life insurance to ensure success in this life, and jumping off the temple um, was to provide afterlife assurance. That's not for me.
What was the last temptation again that Jesus was offered?
Well, to provide afterlife
But
assurance.
what was the actual temptation in the story?
Oh, to jump down off the temple and survive the fall.
So those were the temptations to do that.
So again, the three things he was tempted to do is provide this life assistance, this life insurance, and afterlife assurance. And he said, that's not what I'm here for.
So what was he here for?
He was here to um, be a Sherpa, to facilitate in people an awakening to um, full spectrum awareness, the awareness of the background reality, and awareness of the primary rather than the secondary dimensions.
So someone would say, well, he did perform miracles, and he did, he did say, if you believe in, believe in me, and you get eternal life, or maybe John said that, or some people said that, but they would say, yeah, he did do all those things that you're saying that he wasn't here to do.
Yeah, but see, those were all byproducts. See, that was not his intention. He did that when it seemed an appropriate thing to do. For example, healing. But when people ask him, "How did you do that?" and he said, "Well, I didn't do anything. My Father is working, and so therefore I'm working." In other words, the process is working. The flow is working. The flow is what does the miracles. I don't do it. I just invite people to participate in the flow, and miraculous things occur.
So basically, you're saying that he didn't come to do that because, and the reason what shows is when they ask him why, how did you do that? He says, my father did it through me. It wasn't me who did it. So he's not trying to get a following
Right.
in that sense.
Right.
Any other thoughts of that?
No.
So I mean, my friend, I told my friend one time that Jesus, he would go to the other side of the river or something. But the idea that he was not, when people started to follow him, he would kind of go off to himself. Or is this true? Or I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the perfect example of that is after the story about the feeding of the 4,000 or the 5,000, and he began to realize that he was. I'm reading between the lines. He began to realize that he could develop a following of that by providing this life assistance. So he said, "I'm out of here. I don't want a following." So he went to the other side, and the first group that met him on the other side, he said, "Go home. You came just for another handout, for another um, party, free party on the beach. But I'm not here to provide that. Just go home. That's not what I'm here for."
Mm-hmm.
And only the one group that hung out long enough, he finally said to them, there were just a few people left because he had sent other people home for other reasons. And this group, he said, "Why are you still here?" And they said, "There's no place else to go. This is the only place where we can really benefit from a Sherpa. You're the only Sherpa we know."
Mm-hmm. What were the other groups though?
Well, the first one was the group that wanted another handout. The second one was the group that thought he was insane or trying to create a following and trying to show off. So he sent those home. A third group was the group that said, "Oh, I know what he meant." So they figured out they had the answer. So they went off and started their own churches to provide to 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 promote the content rather than to facilitate the awareness. So that's what I call the group that wanted to start their own churches because they thought they understood it. They figured it out intellectually. Let's see, what was the fourth group? I forget.
They're the ones who wanted to be discoverers or explorers.
Yeah, the last group is the one that they wanted a Sherpa. They're the ones that Jesus said, "Well, why are you still here? Why are you still hanging out?" And they said, "Well, there's no place else to go." We haven't found a Sherpa anywhere else.
So, any other thoughts of that, Grandpa?
No.
So, you talked a lot about, so you want to be a discover. It's about discovery and research and development and inquiry. You don't you want to. It's about evolution. And if you're just like worshiping something, then you're kind of you're cutting yourself off from inquiry and everything. Any thoughts of that,
Yeah,
Grandpa?
you're cutting yourself off from the flow. See the issue. See when he said, "Leave your nets and come follow me." See, he saw that the people, the were fishermen uh, working in the fishing industry, were just here to survive. And he said, "Well, if, why don't you leave your nest and come and follow me? Follow me as an explorer and a discoverer, not as a follower." So, so that's why he was here to be a Sherpa, to find people who wanted a Sherpa, who wanted to awaken to the flow, or what I used to call growing up and waking up. See, growing up is upgrading your software, and waking up is going from what I call magical thinking, superstitious thinking, ritualistic thinking, and mythical thinking, and rational thinking. So that's the waking up. These are various ways of thinking until eventually you go beyond rational thinking to transrational, or or intuitive and inspired thinking. That's waking up. Growing up is upgrading your software from animal-like software of just survival,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
survival to belonging to exploring and eventually discovering and awakening to full awareness. That's growing up.
Any other thoughts of that, Grandpa?
No,
So, you would say that it's never anybody who's at fault. It's their software.
right.
So what does that mean?
Well, it's like
We might have to go over the software systems and everything.
it's like Trump. See, people are really many people Trump, and others are very aligned with him. And the fault, the problem that Trump or anybody else expresses is not their fault. It's the fault of their software. See, if you divide the world, if your software, if your way of applying yourself in life, is what I call your application software, is to deal with the impression or the theory or the conclusion that there are only two kinds of people in life. There are people who are for me and people who are against me. There are people who are my allies and there are people who are my enemies. If that's your software, if that's the way you're looking at the world, then the way you act, the way you apply yourself in life is going to be limited by that software, because you will see people as only your enemies or your allies. You won't see them as mutual participants in either what I call a global enterprise or mutual participants in the flow. So the the software, the application software, goes from um, predator and prey. The second stage is allies and enemies. The third stage is good guys and bad guys, right and wrong, insider, outsider. Um, and then the next stage is um, superiors, inferiors, and equals. At least you see that there's some people you're equals, but there are other people who are superior and others who are inferior. That's that's that becomes a kind of software, a way of applying yourself to life. You deal with life because you think that some people are inferior to you, some are superior, and some are equal. But eventually, you can upgrade as you go beyond the restrictions of your ego. You can begin to understand that there is no such thing as superior, inferior, equal. They're only mutual participants. And your first stage in mutual participation is a participation in local projects. And marriage is probably the most obvious example. When two people get together and they become mutual participants in the local enterprise, of providing, establishing a household for themselves, and then raising a family, then you're mutual participants in this local project. But some people never go beyond that. The next stage is become mutual participants in global projects, in making the world a better place for everyone. And eventually, you can outgrow that and upgrade to the software where we become mutual participants in the flow. That's that metaphor where parallel beams potentiate one another and shed much light because both are participating in the flow. And when you get two or more on a basketball court, for example, participating in the flow, or you get two or more teams, both teams participating in the flow, then you have an incredible um, sense of awareness that something is operating here in us and around us and through us that's beyond the possible accomplishments of the ego and experience-based thinking, rational thinking.
Mm. Any other thoughts on that, Grandpa?
No.
So it's interesting you said experience-based thinking, and when you said that, it reminded me of the Garden of Eden story. Didn't you say that was related to experience-based thinking, the fruit?
Yeah, the metaphor of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, that's experience-based knowledge. In other words, you base your way of understanding the world on your experience, your accumulated experience. It's like a computer. See, that experience-based knowledge is the kind of knowledge that can be uploaded into a computer and create the illusion of an immortality project. See, because what you're doing is you're making your experience-based thinking immortal. But when you go beyond experience-based thinking, you can't upgrade that because there's no content to that. It's a spontaneous moment-to-moment awareness of an eternal reality and a participation in that. And that can't be contained, nor is there's no container for that, and there is no content. It doesn't exist as content. It's just there. It just is. It's ising all the time.
Any other thoughts on that, Grandpa?
No.
So we're talking about the experience-based thinking and the fruit and everything, and it's making me think of so accumulated knowledge, experience-based thinking. How does this relate to basketball? So if it's experience-based thinking, am I like, okay, if I do this and I do this, then is it calculative? Is it, how do we describe this? Is this related to that?
Yeah, yeah. See, you need that in order to become strong enough to go beyond that.
Okay.
That's the reason why we have in the Garden of Eden story that myth, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. The tree of life is the flow. It's knowledge. It's awareness that comes to you in the moment, and you just respond in the flow.
Mm.
That's what my understanding.
It's like connection to God.
Yeah.
What were we saying?
Yeah, it's my understanding that's what it means to be in the flow. Is to eat the fruit from the tree of life, rather than the tree of knowledge.
So what's interesting is people would relate the tree of knowledge and the tree of life to the cross. Is that maybe representative oneness, or what could that be? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that. The tree of life.
Yeah, maybe it's a cross.
Yeah.
It's that oneness, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But okay, let's make another video. So we kind of got some ideas covered here, and then we'll make another video hopefully in 1 second.